everyone, and welcome again to another Topos Institute Colloquium. Today, we're very happy to have B. Rousse talking to us about, well, care. Go ahead, B.
Thank you, David. Thanks so much for the invitation to present at the Colloquium. It is a very welcome way to start my official connection with Topos, where I'll be starting as a visiting researcher on April 1st. So um, thanks for this invitation. I'm going to get started with my slideshow here. I welcome you to interrupt if you have a clarifying question along the way. And then we're going to leave about 10 minutes at the end for more questions. Here we go. Okay, you're seeing my title page, right, David? Okay,
Yes, I
thanks.
am.
Here we go. So the topic of the talk is language, technology, and care. I've sketched out three parts into conclusion. The first part is AI, instrumental rationality, and care. The second part is some dimensions of caring. The third part is caring versus valuing, although I don't think I'm going to have time to say much there. And then we will conclude. So here is the first section about AI, instrumental rationality, and care. I was asking Dali to help me with some pictures for the slideshow, and apparently it has not encountered the phrase instrumental rationality very much. But this was my favorite image it gave, given to my prompts, so I ran with the mangled spelling. Okay, so I want to start with a recent article from technology writer and thinker and podcaster Evgeny Morozov, who wrote this piece for discussion in the Boston Review and then solicited responses from a fascinating cast of characters. Um, the ones that stand out to me especially are Brian Eno and Terry Winograd, who is on the call. Hi, Terry. Thanks for joining. And so Morozov is imagining a kind of alternate past and alternate future of AI technology. And he's digging into how the emergence of AI research happened in a context of military and corporate problem solving. And he sees the history of AI as having been usurped by this tendency to be efficient and solve problems. And he asks himself, what would an alternate history and an alternate future of AI be if it could be liberated or detached from this imperative for instrumental rationality? And so let me just give a few passages from him. He says, early AI focused on replicating the intelligence of a fully committed, emotionally detached office worker, a species of William White's organization man. And by the way, if you look at some of the way people talk about AGI today, it's very, very similar to this still. You saw from Ezra Klein from the New York Times had a recent episode about the government knows AGI is coming. And the way Ezra Klein defines AGI is an AI system that can do basically anything a human being can do behind a computer. The earlier researchers in AI didn't make this qualification that it has to be a remote worker. They were still imagining that they could do anything a human worker could do. But today it's been narrowed down to AGI, at least in the imagination of some commentators and researchers, is the skills of a remote office worker. So Morozov goes on. I think it's not a coincidence that early AI tools closely mirrored the instrumental reason of clerical and administrative workers in the very institutions, government, corporate, and military that spearheaded AI research. And he asks, why should the world historical promise of computing be confined to replicating bureaucratic rationality? It's a really good question. And when you start to be sensitive to this issue of bureaucratic instrumental rationality, you start to see it everywhere, not just in modern life, but also in, as Morozov is pointing out, in the discourse about artificial intelligence. Let me just share one notable example, which is something that's become kind of a go-to example in conversations about AI alignment. It's the so-called paperclip maximizer thought experiment from Nick Bostrom's book, Superintelligence. Although I don't think Bostrom actually uses the phrase paperclip maximizer, but he imagines a scenario in which an AI system was designed to create paperclips as efficiently as possible. Somewhere along the way, an intelligence explosion, an AI intelligence explosion happens, and this system becomes super intelligent. And that means that it's able then to pursue its goal of creating paperclips with ruthless and unrestrained efficiency. And what it does, as the thought experiment goes, is that it kind of turns the world, turns the whole planet into a factory of paperclips, because it is monomaniacally pursuing the goal that had been given to it. And it has this, what I call a monster of unrestrained instrumental rationality, or a monster of instrumental rationality run amok. It has a goal, a value, to create paperclips efficiently, but it is impervious to the question of why it has this value, why this value matters, and why anyone or anything should care about it. Here in my illustration is a kind of life-size sculpture made out of paper clips of two torsos embracing, called Paperclip Embrace, inspired by Nick Bostrom's thought experiment. And this is on exhibit at a very intriguing and enjoyable museum in San Francisco called the Misalignment Museum. I hope it's still there, and if it is, I would go if I was you. Okay, so where else does the notion of instrumental rationality show up? It shows up everywhere. And two major thinkers of technological modernity of the 20th century have really brought this into focus for us. The first one is Max Weber, who wrote towards the end of his classic study, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, about what he called an iron cage of instrumental rationality. Really, in German, the phrase is something like steel-hardened shell. But the first translator of the book, Talcott Parsons, translated as iron cage, and it sounds cooler, frankly. And so it's kind of stuck. So Weber talked about how basically the hard work and frugal living of the Protestant work ethic dovetailed with the emerging logic of capital accumulation, industrial capitalism. And they kind of mutually reinforced each other. And then the whole notion of hard work and frugal living and organizing your time and being efficient spun out of control, spun out of the context of the Protestant work ethic itself, and kind of took over our common sense about how one should live life. They become dominating values of modern life, a dominating way to be instrumentally rational. All around us, we're filling out forms. We are standing in lines and bureaucracies. We are trying to live our lives in optimal ways. Instrumental rationality has become inevitable for us. And here in my illustration, I put the paperclip monster locked in the iron cage of instrumental rationality. Now, another way to put this comes from Heidegger. I had Dal-E help me illustrate two essays from him. One is called The Age of the World Picture, and the other one is The Question Concerning Technology. The Age of the World Picture helps to point out how we kind of relate to the world in this detached way. And that we no longer experience at a place as a place of belonging. This is an attempt to try to think about what's new and different about technological modernity, say, as opposed to a previous era of, say, pre-industrial living, medieval ways of living, ancient Greek ways of living. If you imagine, try to get clear on what's going on with the modern technological way of being, we seem to be detached from the world. We look at it as a place that we can model with mathematics, that we can, whose resources we can harness with our technological prowess. And so we kind of put it in a frame. We detach from it. It's like a picture we can behold and manipulate. Um, and in Heidegger's way of looking at it, what Weber called the iron cage isn't really just a cage. It's become our whole way of being. So Heidegger talks about a technological understanding of being. Reality is revealed to us as a place where we should be that efficiently solve problems. Efficiently solving problems and maximizing our resources and efficiency is just how the world draws us to act. So we relate to the planet and each other as a pool of resources at our disposal. Our world is set up, and even our common sense is drawn to compel ourselves to prioritize efficiency and optimization. So these are two kind of diagnoses of what's going on in technological modernity connected to this issue that Morozov raises of instrumental rationality. To help you get a feel for this, I have uh, had my assistant help me with some illustrations. And on the right here, you've got the paperclip monster um, submerged in disposable styrofoam cups, because a styrofoam cup is a really good example of a technological object. It's made out of material that is maximally flexible, that can take any shape, that can do anything efficiently and optimally. It's made without care. People use them up and use them once, consume them without any care, throw them away without thinking about it. Often you go to the Starbucks or wherever, and they give you two cups to throw away. Now maybe they're paper, but still, this is there. There's this disposability, this easy disposability of the things we use, is part of the point Heidegger's making about and what he calls the enframing way of being. And over here, I have the paperclip monster um, tangled up in what are supposed to be disposable plastic bags, because this is another one. In California, we've done better at waking up about this, but still, I grew up in Florida. You go to Florida, you buy a pack of gum at Publix, they give you two plastic bags to take away your one pack of gum in. They don't think about it. They grab the gum, grab the two plastic bags, throw in your gum. You walk away from the cashier, you remove your gum, you throw away the plastic bags 20 feet after you got them without thinking about it. It's just what you do. It's easy, it's efficient. Um, and in the middle, I then contrast the paperclip monster who's been invited to a Japanese tea ceremony where there are cups and tea kettles and ways of sitting and ways of relating and caring for the things, ways of storing them, ways of interacting with them. That is sets up a strong contrast to the disposability of the styrofoam or paper cup and the plastic bag. So these are just to illustrate the what it means to live in a technological, an age of technological understanding of being in the iron cage of instrumental rationality. Okay, next turn in the dialectic, I want to introduce Terry Winograd's reply to Morozov. Terry wrote a short response with a title that I like a lot. You see this machines of loving grace phrase flying around a lot in the AI discussion. But I like what Terry did here is to bring in the notion of care as a blind spot in most discussions about AI. So here's what Terry says. I'm over here on the right of my slide. He says, I'm not as enamored as Morozov seems to be with the world of Storm's flaneur. This is Morozov is imagining, again, like a way of using and relating to technology that is not harnessed to instrumental rationality, but that can be playful, original, unrestrained by goals. So here's what Terry says. I agree that there's something attractive about the image of playfulness, imagination, originality, with no problems to solve and no goals to pursue. But there are deeper human consequences and opportunities that are at stake when we design technologies. What Morozov leaves out in his efficient versus playful dichotomy is the role of human care and concern. I'm going to jump down to my other highlighted part. Care is not a form of intelligence. The philosopher John Hoagland famously said, the trouble with artificial intelligence is that computers don't give a damn. This is just as true of today's LLM-based systems as it was of the good old-fashioned symbolic or rule-based AI that Hoagland critiqued. Rather than a kind of intelligence, care is an underlying foundation of human meaning. We don't want to fill the world with uncaring, playful machines any more than with uncaring efficiency generators. So Terry's raising the issue of care as a missing element in the AI conversation. And here's another way to put his punchline that sets up what I want to do next. The problem isn't how to engender AI systems that are more playful and less boring, but to lay out what it would mean to create and deploy systems that are supportive of human care and concern. So, this is a project I also want to contribute to. This is the banner I want to fly to in today's conversation. This is a blind spot and a missing element that I think deserves a lot more of our attention and care. So, the next part of my talk is running with this. This is the talk section called Some Dimensions of Caring and Giving a Damn. That's Hoagland's catchphrase. This is the first line of his 1979 article, Understanding Natural Language, which is a commentary on Terry's work, or it starts off as that. The trouble with artificial intelligence is that computers don't give a damn. It's one of my favorite opening lines in a philosophy essay. It's been republished in this 1998 collection, Having Thought. So, some dimensions of giving a damn. Here we go. I want to introduce the issue of caring by reference to the great legendary nurse practitioner and theorist of nurse education, Patricia Benner, who brought caring into the center of caring and embodied intuition into the center of thinking about nursing and educating nurses. Here's the first couple of sentences in her 1989 book, The Primacy of Caring, Stress and Coping in Health and Illness, co-authored with Judith Rubel. Caring, as it is used in this book, means that persons, events, projects, and things matter to people. Caring is essential if the person is to live in a differentiated world where some things really matter, others are less important, or not important at all. Caring as a word for being connected and having things matter works well because it fuses thought, feeling, and action, knowing and being. And the term caring is used appropriately to describe a wide range of involvements, from romantic love to parental love to friendship, from caring for one's garden to caring about one's work to caring for and about one's patients. So that's a really nice opening statement about the connection between caring and mattering and having an orientation in the world, a differentiated sense of what matters, what's relevant, what you're drawn to do, who are you involved with. Caring gives us this a kind of fundamental orientation. The second voice I'd like to draw on in this conversation is Harry Frankfurt, who has a collection of essays, all short essays titled The Importance of What We Care About, which is the name of one of his essays in it. And it's the best essay in the book, and the good reason why he chose the book title from that point. Of course, Frankfurt is more famous for his essay on bullshit, like the hype sticker up here points out. That was a little essay that got spun off to a standalone volume and got Harry Frankfurt suddenly talking on late night talk shows about bullshit. And it's not a coincidence there was such an interest in that because we live in an era of bullshits, and there's a concern with ways of being in language that don't have a commitment to truth. That's what a bullshitter is, according to Frankfurt. A liar is a person who says something with the intention to deceive. A bullshitter is someone who doesn't care if they're deceiving or not. They're just saying stuff. And so a lot of people have been saying, for example, that large language models are essentially bullshitters. They have no relationship to the truth. They're just saying stuff. So that's why Frankfurt's more well known. But I want to talk to you about his essay, The Importance of What We Care About. And I just want to pull out kind of two big contrasts. They're of a piece that he makes here. And mostly he's connecting first to the insight that what we care about is indexed to our particular life history and circumstances. Where you're born, what family you're born into, what language you speak, what historical moment you're born into, all of that conditions what shows up as worthy of care to you. That means caring is not a matter of impersonal rationality or morality. Reason and morality talk about what everybody should do, everybody who's rational, everybody who's moral. But caring, when you care, you're not trying to be like everybody. You care when things draw you, they matter to you, they get you. And that sometimes takes us beyond reason and morality. And this is really important for us to grasp and to reckon with. Um, Human beings are the most intelligent beings we've met so far, but our caring can compel us to act against reason and morality. So our intelligence is fed partially by our ability to be rational. Our ability to be rational helps us to be moral, but we also have this proclivity that when we care deeply about something, it can move us into actions that transcend or violate the dictates of morality and reason. And I don't want to say this is terrifying. It can be terrifying, but it's a fact about human life and human intelligence that also gives rise to some of the beauty and the majesty and the awesomeness of being human. You can't get all of that stuff without having this intense passion that people sometimes show that takes them against reason and morality. So I have two images here to illustrate this. The one on the left is the one used by Kierkegaard. This is the Caravaggio painting of Abraham sacrificing Isaac. So the story goes Abraham has a unconditional loving commitment or faith in God. He also loves his son, but he had the experience that his faith in God demanded that he sacrifice his son. And it's a terrible thing to have to face. But if you are really fully devoted to your faith, as Kierkegaard was imagining Abraham was, you've got to be ready to do what it demands of you. And that's what Kierkegaard, for you existentialists, calls the teleological suspension of the ethical, suspending the ethical for a higher purpose. And it is terrifying that that kind of thing can happen, and but also beautiful sometimes. The one on the right is a more contemporary, down to earth example of it's from a movie called Whiplash, where you've got this guy who's a maniac for becoming the best jazz drummer around, and he enlists himself with a maniac drummer coach, and he almost ruins his life, dedicating himself, acting totally irrationally in the pursuit of his dream of becoming an awesome jazz drummer. So that's a kind of commitment again that clashes with the dictates of being reasonable and doing what reason demands. So now here's the third dimension of caring or giving a damn that I want to introduce, namely that it takes place in the context or against the background of what phenomenologists like to call average everydayness, or what we sometimes call common sense. The typical things people do, like what we care about, is in placed in the context of our everyday common sense, of the routines that we have of our everyday life. Um, these everyday routines, I mean everything from how you stand in a line to order your coffee, to how you drive, what side of the road you drive on, how you greet your neighbors, all these little tiny habits of everyday life. They provide a source of social order and shared sense making, provide the space in which you can be called to care about the particular things that matter to you. It's also a source of automatic behaviors that can be disconnected from our care. Um, so Topos is in downtown Berkeley. And one of the things you notice when you spend time in downtown Berkeley is how audacious the pedestrians are, and how conciliatory or permissive the drivers are. If a pedestrian even looks at the curb or looks at the street, the drivers all hit the brakes and they let the pedestrian walk. It's an awesome place to be a pedestrian. Um, Now, if you see sometimes tourists who get lost and they're driving around downtown Berkeley and they're not familiar with this norm that one stops 6 feet away if a pedestrian even looks at the streets, and they kind of are lost and looking around and they flow up to a pedestrian, you see these poor tourists absolutely ruthlessly berated for violating the norm of letting the pedestrians walk into the street without looking. So that's an example of what one does and how it can also become kind of automatic and disconnected from paying attention to what's really going on there. Okay, this is the fourth dimension. It's embodiment. We don't have that common sense or that sense of everydayness. It's not just a list in our head or a bunch of patterns that we match in our mind. It's embodied, and we learn these shoulds by spending time in the place where they are valid, and also by growing up in our household where our parents teach us our manners. So here I have the humanoid, I have the human taskmaster teaching his humanoid robots manners, like stand up straight. And so it's interesting to point out that the way we learn our manners, our parents don't realize they're indoctrinating us or inviting us into a whole understanding of reality, of a whole way of being, of habits that we then form the whole background of our way of being in the world when they teach us our manners. And so that's what the sociologist Pierre Bourdieu is good at pointing out. And I just want to share a passage from his book, Outline of a Theory of Practice. Look, this is like one long sentence. It's a long, beautiful sentence, but it takes some parsing. So here's what he says about parents teaching their children manners and how this embodies in them a common sense that is enmeshed in a whole entire understanding of reality and understanding of being. Here's Bourdieu. Nothing seems more ineffable, more incommunicatable, more intimate, and therefore more precious than the values given body, made body, by the transubstantiation achieved, by the hidden persuasion of an implicit pedagogy, capable of instilling a whole cosmology, an ethic, a metaphysics, and a political philosophy through injunctions as insignificant as stand up straight, don't hold your knife in your left hand, and stop 6 feet when you see a pedestrian look at the street. We embody these norms. We embody this sense of what our reality is. Okay, number five, I want to talk about the fifth dimension of caring and giving a damn is language and commitment. And here I'm going to riff off of the book that Terry Winograd and Fernando Flores, another longtime collaborator of mine, who I think is on the call too. Hi, Fernando. Thanks for being here. Um, this is something I'm going to riff on from their book, Understanding Computers and Cognition, which they published in 1985 or 1986. And here they want to raise the issue of language. What is language? You know, the rising of computers that we can talk to, and the dream of programming computers that can talk, which Terry was one of the guiding figures of in the early years of AI. This raises all kinds of issues like what really is language? Everyone has that question on their mind today. What is language? What is communication? Is it just next token prediction? Is it just pattern matching? What are we doing when words come to our mind and we're talking with other people? So the argument that Terry and Fernando make in this book is that communication is not just pattern matching and transmitting information. It's the coordination of commitments. And so this they are appropriating and running with the speech act theory and the philosophy of language, which originated with John Austin at Oxford and was systematized by John Searle at UC Berkeley. And for example, there's these different ways we coordinate action in language: making assertions, making declarations, making requests, making offers and promises. Let's look at what's really involved in making offers and promises. This shows you something about how our linguistic capacities are rooted in our capacities to care and to take care of concerns. So, this is just a kind of run through about what's going on when we're making promises. And I have here the parenthetical qualification: promises with first person commitment, promises that take responsibility for being promises, that take care for being a promise. Because, of course, often people make promises that they don't really mean. And that definitely happens. And often people make assertions that they don't know if they're true or false. And that definitely happens. But we can make assertions and we can make promises with something that philosophers call first person authority or first person commitment. And that's when the it shows how our linguistic capacities are really rooted in our capacities to care and to be in the world with others. It shows once you start to see what's going on in promising that this is not a sequence of words uttered mechanically, at least these ones with first person commitment. When we promise, we're setting a stake in a possible future, and we're guiding our subsequent actions with others to take care of an underlying concern. Someone someone asks us for something, we promise to give it to them. We got a concern of theirs that we're orienting to. David invited me to be on the show, I mean the colloquium. I agreed. When I agreed, that became a promise. And now the concern is that I had to bring about to take care of was to create a presentation that I thought was relevant to Topos's thinking, and that could kind of also set a space for my collaboration with Topos, and that can also kind of say something that Terry is helping to say also about reminding the concern here is reminding people how important it is to connect language and AI with our capacities to care and take care of concerns. So when we make a promise with first person commitment, we're setting a stake in a possible future, guiding our subsequent actions to take care of an underlying concern. And look, when it comes down to it, this is an expression of my stand in the world, what I care about, the kind of person I project myself to be. When we're making these promises with this kind of commitment, our offers and our promises are expressions of what we care about. They're expressions of who we are. How we act in the world is a manifestation of our identity, expression of what we care about and what our concerns are, how we can be of service to the world. Um, so that's something the existentialists also were always pointing out for people. Look, promises are not in your head. They're a social practice. They're a dance. They're a way of being involved in the world with others. We have to make other people have to be ready to receive what we're fulfilling when we're promising. We have to make sure we're offering something that they want and that they care about, um, and and so forth. There's a lot going on in a intricate dance that we're together when we're promising and fulfilling promises with each other. And because we live in this first person committed stance, sometimes anyway, our promises and failure to fulfill them produce these emotions that philosophers sometimes call reactive attitudes: trust and distrust, gratitude and resentment, flattery and condescension. The conversations for promising and our failure or our success and fulfilling promises create these emotional reactions in others. And that says something about how we relate to each other with this first person committed stance. Because if a child of 5 years old breaks a promise to us, we don't get resentful towards them. We don't relate to them in this agential first person committed way that we relate, that is our kind of standard or our baseline for relating normally to people. Um, if somebody is an addict and they break your promise, you don't hold them responsible in quite the same way as the non-addicted person breaks a promise to you, because we can have some explanation that you can relate to the addict as a there's a mechanism going wrong there. They don't have first person authority over what their actions are. And this isn't a thought that we do. Our emotions do this. I mean, this isn't a thought process. When somebody breaks a promise to you, you feel that resentment, or if it's a promise that matters to you, you feel that resentment, you feel that distrust. Your emotional reactions are keyed to making this distinction and treating others as participants in this dance of commitment. This is just a plug. This is the kind of thing that my friend Peter Dinning and I also spoke about in a very compressed way in an article we wrote a year ago, Can Machines Be in Language? And our line there was predicting what words or tokens come next is radically different from making and keeping the promises expressed in those words. Okay, number six. I got two more points about what are the dimensions of caring. This isn't an exhaustive taxonomy, but it's a walkthrough of the space of what it means to give a damn. And the point here, remember, is to say we want to illuminate what it means to be the caring, giving a damn kind of agent that human beings are, because this is a conversation that often goes lacking in the AI discussion, which, as Morozov points out, has been founded in and guided by teleological or instrumental rationality, which often leaves aside the question of care, and we need to bring it back. Our mortality is really important for the fact that things matter to us. That and how things matter to us depends on the fact of our mortality, or what my new friend Leo called our terminal end state. Um, the fact that our lives have this endpoint, that we have a limited time, that is puts a pragmatic pressure to hierarchize our time. It makes it possible anyway for some moments to matter more than others because you can't always just do it later. We've got a deadline. And that means the possibility of some moments mattering more than others, some relationships mattering more than others, some projects being more important than others comes from this pragmatic pressure to make relative distinctions between worth, between what matters and doesn't. Um, so mortality, both the mortality of our finite biological body and the finitude of our projects, our relationships, those are all can die also. They have an end point. They don't last forever. And the fact that our projects and our commitments live in the light of finitude is what gives them their preciousness and mattering. Here's the last one I'm going to tell about what are some dimensions of mattering. What are some dimensions of giving a damn? And it is the historical space. That and how things matter to us depends on the shared historical space in which we live. I have Martin Luther's famous phrase, "Here I stand, I can do no other here." This is one that Harry Frankfurt talks about, and other philosophers of his generation, like Bernard Williams. They talk about this as an example of how caring can motivate you to do certain kinds of actions that go against the normalcy of your social milieu and that compel you with a certain kind of force. But it's also showing something about the historical situatedness of care. No one today can really be gripped with the same intensity that gripped Luther about the sale of indulgences. It's not a live issue for us. We can get gripped by questions about the design of AI systems, AI safety, climate change, um, the skyrocketing rates of teen depression. We have a historical space that sets up issues that matter to us, that can grip us. And it's important to see. And one way you can see this is by also paying attention to the nihilism of the technological age. By that, I mean riffing from Weber and Heidegger and noticing by looking around that we do live in a world that strongly prioritizes efficiency and problem solving and optimization for their own sake and accumulation of power and status for their own sake. Um, this is the kind of things that started to bother youth subcultures in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It's kind of like in the post-World War II, I'm talking in America anyway, the post-World War II way of normalcy set in. And you started to have the rise of youth subcultures who looked at their parents' generation and said, what are these people even doing? They are living successful lives, being efficient, optimizing their options, having material wealth. But at the same time, we lived in a world that created the possibility of nuclear annihilation. We're creating climate disasters. We have all these other social problems, and the youth started to say, "What are our parents doing? This is a sham life that I don't want to belong to." And I have a little clip now I'm going to show you that has 30 seconds from the 1955 movie directed by Nicholas Ray, Rebel Without a Cause, that really grasps the emergence of this attitude. I think of it as the essentially punk attitude that rejects the meaninglessness and sham life of the elder generation who seems to be caught up in efficiency and accumulation for their own sake and says, I don't want to belong, I'm not going to belong to that world. There's nothing to do there. And then I juxtapose it with a clip from a 1987 documentary about the punk scene in Tampa, Florida. because that's where you see the punks saying the same thing. There's nothing to do. There's nothing worthwhile to do in a historical space that imposes on you the imperative to be efficient, optimized, and accumulative for the sake of being efficient, optimized, and accumulative. Okay, here's the clips. It's just 1 minute long. This is from right smack dab in the middle of Rebel Without a Cause. These two characters are about to play chicken and run their cars as close as you can to the edge near the Griffith cliffs, and they're having a cig and a moment of truth right before their game of chicken.
That's the edge. That's the end.
Yeah. Certainly is.
You know something? I like you. You know that?
Why do we do this?
You gotta do something. Now, don't you?
What's your name?
Frank,
How old are you?
15.
Where do you go to school?
I don't.
What do you do?
Nothing.
You don't work?
No.
You live at home? How do your parents feel about you being in the scene?
They hate me.
They hate you?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you still live at home?
Yeah. It's free.
Where do you think the scene is going? Why are you here? What do you do here?
What else is there to do?
You got to do something. What else is there to do? In other words, the age that they find themselves living in, they don't experience as making available worthwhile projects because it's all about optimizing options and accumulation and being efficient, and they see nothing there for them. So this is the punk attitude. Why do the punks find nothing to do in their parents' world? I put parenthetically here, what the punks go on to do actually is to build their own subworld. They express their inability to find something to care about in the mainstream world by creating a subculture or by creating a music scene that they can then find worthwhile projects in. Making music, putting on shows, making records, developing a whole world where then things can matter in a way that it's like a bubble of belonging in the midst of a nihilistic age. That's what the punk music scene is. The punks live in a world that prioritizes efficiency, optimization, and power for the sake of further accelerating efficiency, optimization, and power. They're revolted by their generations living a shallow, hollow, shallow life in the grip of this drive to efficiency, optimization, and power while the planet drifts towards destruction. They sense that efficiency, optimization, and power for their own sake are inimical to care. You cannot tend to what matters while trying to efficiently optimize and control it. The 1950s were full of this realization. One of my favorite cinematic expressions of it comes in Hitchcock's movie Vertigo. This is the part of the movie where this guy Scotty, the Cary Grant character, has a new girlfriend, and she kind of reminds him of his previous lover or the previous woman he loved, and he controls everything that she does. He chooses what dress she wears. He chooses what makeup she puts on, how she does her hair, what jewelry she wears, what she does, how she talks. And the experience of watching this movie is like seeing how ridiculous this is. It's a cinematic reductio ad absurdum to the idea that you can love and care while being so controlling and so optimizing. You can't properly tend to what matters while trying to optimize and control it. So I've already kind of put my cards on the table about my being a lifelong punk rocker. This is a picture of me playing drums back when I had a better comb over. And I put it here just to show that this is an experience I have of how language and commitment create a world. A language enables us to belong to a community in which we can project an identity with long-term futures and overarching commitments. Our attraction towards which is cemented in linguistic articulation and sustained in word and deed with others over time. This is what language is for us. Our attraction to identities is cemented, and commitments and what we care about is cemented in linguistic articulation. Punks get attracted to punk because they hear songs that speak to them, that articulate something about the condition of being alive today, that they can relate to and commit to. And language then enables us to sustain our worlds and communities in word and deed over time. So in a phrase that I actually got from David Spivak and conversations we've been having, we can think of caring as tending to what matters. Language is deeply connected with how our capacity and proclivity to tend to what matters. Now I'm summarizing this whole section and I'm coming around to the conclusion of the whole call. Care is not simply a feeling of affection. We started out this section wanted to say, what does it mean to give a damn? What does it mean to care? The word in English has this connotation of like, oh, I feel good about this person. I like them. This is not what we're talking about here. Caring is not simply a feeling of affection. It provides our orientation in the world. What we care about solicits our attention and our action, involving us in the world with others. And here's the summary of this whole section, just to cap it off for you. We talked about the distinction between what matters and what doesn't matter from that passage from Patricia Benner. We talked about how caring can take us beyond reason and morality. We talked about how caring is embedded in average everydayness, a life lived with others, unreflectively, that creates a space in which certain things can matter to you. We talked about how care is embodied in manners and dispositions, not just in your head. We talked about the first person committed stance towards language and a third person observational stance that doesn't display that same level. We talked about mortality. We talked about the historical space. And we came to the provisional conclusion, that we can think of caring as tending to what matters. And we had the conclusion that you cannot properly tend to what matters while trying to optimize and control it. This brings us to a very important issue for what we're doing today and how we think about technology and the life that we're living now, the historical times in which we're living, in which we have to use technology to be efficient and optimize. We have to. Yes, it's created problems. It's created a way of being that makes us relate to a disposable planet. But it's not like we can stop making technology. We need to use technologies in a way that enhance our care, that contribute to our capacity to belong with each other and to the planet. So we have something you could call the paradox of technological caring. We cannot properly tend to what matters while trying to optimize and control it. But we must design and use technologies to adequately tend to what matters. So we can't tend to what matters while controlling it and optimizing it, but we have to find a way to design our technologies and to design our conversations about how the technologies are used so that they can enable us to tend to what matters. In the wise words of the relationship therapist, Esther Perel, it's not a problem to be solved, but a paradox to be managed, or a paradox to be lived. I don't have time to do this section. The proposal is that values are abstractions from caring, and that we often get they are abstractions. That we relate to values as realities, and they can actually detach us from caring, the caring they were meant to capture. This is a whole other talk. I hope to have some time to do it. The drivers in downtown Berkeley is a good example. They have the value of being maximally permissive to the pedestrians. They end up being ruthless to visitors who are not from Berkeley. And to summarize, this is my section about the history of values thinking in the 19th century. I hope we have another time to talk about it. I have a question for you. Please write to me. Let's have this conversation. How do you understand this balance we need to strike between caring and optimizing? What does tending to what matters mean for you? How does it relate, as you see it, to the conversation about AI that Terry Winograd and Eugene Morozov started us all thinking about today? We live in these times that these new devices, the new AI systems that are coming out, really might turn out to be world historical changers. We don't know yet. It kind of depends on how things continue to develop, and it depends on our practices that all of us, tinkerers, technologists, thinkers, family members. It depends on the practices and the conversations that all of us are having about what it means to be alive and to care in a technological world. We can't leave it up just to the makers of these technologies. Yes, I want to make a contribution for um, bringing back to life the concern with care and giving a damn and concern back into this conversation. But we also need to all take it upon ourselves to be having these conversations about how these technologies can enable us to care, to connect with our concerns, and not to let ourselves be taken over by the imperatives of efficiency and optimization and kind of mindless distraction that they also pull us into. Thank you for having me. Thank you, David. Thank you, Topos. I have a new Topos Institute email address. You can be the first person to email me if you write me there after the call. And if you scan this little barcode I made, I think it works. It will take you to my philosophy newsletter where I publish a short piece of writing about this kind of stuff once a week or once every other week. I would love to hear from you. And now we have 10 minutes to talk.
Thank you, B. Okay, let's see. So to ask questions, either raise your hand using the React button or just unmute yourself and ask. I'll ask a question. Maybe I hope it doesn't put you on the spot too much. What is it about Topos that you are joining? What we do mathematics. You talked about mathematics early on.
Yeah.
How do you see it kind of in this conversation in terms of tending to what we care about, things like that? Or
Well, from my conversations with you and Brendan, I see that Topos is located, the way you think of yourselves is located exactly at the pivotal juncture of this paradox that that technologies give rise, that are fueled by and give rise to optimization and efficiency, that this clashes with the need to tend to what matters. And yet we have to find a way to design technologies for tending to what matters and taking care of what matters together and having those conversations and having institutions that support that. And that's my understanding of one of the missions that defines what you all are up to. And I think that's very important.
great, thank you. I appreciate that. So Eric Nielsen raised his hand. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, great talk, B. Great to see you here.
Hi, Eric.
Hi. One of the things that just occurs to me in the talk is this distinction that you're bringing up in third person versus first person, and relating it to the business world. And what I see in the business world today is kind of a conversation that, what your first person view is doesn't matter. Your responsibility is to adhere to the third person view, which is the company's view, which is all about optimization and growth and so on and so forth.
Wow.
I'd like to believe that there's a lot of room inside of organizations, to deal with care, internally, and express a unified view. But frankly, that just doesn't really appear to be the case. I think people are reacting, externally because they're frustrated internally.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that's just my experience, my observation, and I'm curious, what you might see from your perspective in working with organizations or leaders, along that line in terms of what it's going to take to really take a stand, perhaps today and shift, that dynamic.
Wow. Thanks, Eric. You're right. And Terry, in his course and his interaction with Morozov, actually raises this point too about the bureaucratic. This is what Weber understood as the bureaucratic rationality. I mean, it is what enables our institutions to function efficiently and to make stuff happen. In a certain sense, it's awesome that we can organize ourselves like that. But when, as we've all seen, it also people then treat each other as simply functions in an organization, and they're encouraged to do so, and it becomes very dehumanizing and a lack of a place of belonging and care. And the kind of work I've been learning how to do with Fernando Flores and his family's company, Pluralistic Networks, is to go into organizations and subtly create new skills or create the skills to remind people that they are beings of care and concern. And that when we coordinate action, it's not just about efficiency, but it's about delivering something that matters to the customer and creating a piece of work together that is human and takes care of the human concerns and the humans behind it all. And that takes training in these embodied skills, like the sociologist Bourdieu we were talking about. We got to put ourselves to retrain ourselves to listen for the concerns and not just the information, and uh, to remind ourselves that we care.
Thank you, B. Great work and so important today. Appreciate you sharing
Thanks,
more
Eric.
about what you're
Okay, Sophie.
Hello. Thank you so much for a great talk.
Hey, Sophie.
I was thinking sort of like one of the things I think about doing at Topos is like creating like thinking a lot about how we communicate or like languages for communication. And I was wondering if you have thoughts about like what modes of communication, either languages or practices that help like bring the care into the room more.
Definitely. Yeah, this is the kind of work I've been doing in for the past 10 years actually with Fernando Flores, who's on the call, and the company he founded. And listen, the short um, version of it is that communication doesn't just happen in the words we say. Communication happens in the listening that we have for each other, and we have the opportunity to create habits of listening where we listen to the person who's there, listen to their concerns, listen to what matters to them, get out of the way of listening that is rushing towards problem solving, that is rushing towards defining problems and already figuring out what to do with them, giving the people space to attuning to what the concerns are, which people don't come preloaded with. Often those only come out in the conversation and in the interaction. And secondly, it's to and in connection with this, it's to connect to the moods and the emotions of the organization and realize that all organizations have an institutional mood that also sets a context for the conversations that happen. And we can be proactive in cultivating moods in the organizations that are more conducive to creating conversations where care and concerns can emerge. And the third one is really to notice that when we're doing stuff together, the quality of our work really does depend on the quality of our conversations. And we can have, thank you. Did you say something?
Sorry, B. There was some chatter on the line from
Okay,
somebody
yeah.
else. I muted them.
I was breaking into a whole speech that could go on forever, but this is only just to summarize by saying the quality of our work depends directly on the quality of our conversations, and creating conversational habits of listening and being, this is what a line from Fernando, being impeccable and taking care of the commitments we generate and doing that with care, not in a kind of righteous way. That shows the way. But thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Great. We might have time for another quick one. Just to ask B, I think just to clarify, when you said the mood of an organization, I know that you have this Heideggerian definition of mood, and I think to demystify it a bit, it's something about possibilities. When
Yeah.
you say that the organization has a mood, can you just quickly clarify that?
Exactly. Yeah. Our moods are connected to our sense of what is possible. You see that in moods. Moods of resignation get common in big organizations. A mood of resignation is, what's the point? There's no point in starting this conversation. There's no point in asking. So that's one you really have to watch out for. But you can also have other moods that create a space that welcomes conversation, that welcomes the exchange of concern. Terry, what's our next move going forward and bringing this conversation to the world?
I think I have an answer to that, but I think it's so hard to deal with the flood of stuff that we get about what's happening in AI. I mean, it's something I saved from my Google News feed, which is three articles. They put in the same box. One says it's happening and it's going to take over. One says it's not happening. We don't know. Another, I mean, it's completely a better projection right now. People's views of what AI is going to do are more Rorschach about what they think than about a real prediction. And I think the question is, how do we cut through that and get people to think about these larger questions?
Yes. Exactly. We all have work to do there. And we invite all of you to join us with that.
Great.
Thanks,
And with
Terry.
that, I think we'll stop the live stream. Let's see. Let me do that real quick, and then we can. Some people like to ask questions not while being recorded, so we can